Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, what's really at stake when it comes to the EU versus Google? Could it be about our data and control of the digital economy? Also this week, the global container shipping business, the nerve center of the world's supply chain, scrambles to cope with the fallout from a cyber attack. Plus, India's biggest tax reform since independence puts the country's administration to the test. Could this be a defining moment for the world's fastest growing economy? But first, this week, let's peer inside Google's search engine. It's one of the most powerful and valuable algorithms ever developed, and it's one of the most closely guarded corporate secrets. It processes nearly 2.3 million search queries every second, a huge number by any reckoning, and nearly as big as the hefty $2.7 billion fine it received this week from the European Union. In fact, you're probably Googling that right now, aren't you? Well, Google will use your data as you do to help present you with that search result. And that's the problem here. This week, Google, which is owned by Alphabet, was charged with breaking EU rules and abusing its monopoly in search, where it controls 95% of the market. The EU is attempting to address one of the key challenges for the digital economy. To what extent should internet giants like Google be allowed to profit from their dominance? Max Bania reports.
The record-breaking fine marks the culmination of a 7-year investigation by the European Commission into Google's online activities. The Commission says the company used its position as the world's most popular search engine to unfairly promote its Google Shopping service at the expense of smaller price comparison sites.
What Google has done is illegal under EU antitrust rules. It has denied other companies the chance to compete on the merits and to innovate. And most importantly, it has denied European consumers the benefits of competition, genuine choice and innovation.
This is what the Commission says is illegal. When users search for items to buy, sponsored results paid for by companies appear prominently at the top of the screen, pushing the competition's products well down the page. European regulators have given the tech giant 90 days to stop its illegal activities. If it doesn't, Google's parent company Alphabet faces fines of up to 5% of its average daily worldwide turnover. That's around $14 million a day. Google denies the claims, saying, "We respectfully disagree with the conclusions announced today. We will review the Commission's decision in detail as we consider an appeal, and we look forward to continuing to make our case." The EU's decision is the latest in a string of cases against US tech firms. Apple and Amazon were both investigated for their tax arrangements in Europe, with Apple forced to pay Ireland $14.3 billion in back taxes. The European Commission says access to the EU's 500 million citizens should be based on merit, not on the power of tech giants to manipulate the market.
Joining us now, Simon Evernett from St Gallen University in Switzerland. Simon oversees the MBA program there and is a professor of international trade and economic development. Welcome, Simon, to Counting the Cost. Tech titans such as Google and Facebook effectively run a duopoly when it comes to digital advertising. This latest fine, then, on Google, is it really about the nature of the digital economy as it stands?
Yes, there's a large part of this. The business models of these tech giants often involve outmaneuvering their rivals and forcing them out of the market, either explicitly or implicitly. And this type of strategy runs straight into the face of EU law on dominant firms. There's a real tension between the law and the strategies of these Silicon Valley firms. And this is the latest example of a US company that's got caught up in it.
So is the EU unfairly targeting the tech titans of our age?
I don't think they're unfairly targeting it. They have their law to enforce, and their law is pretty tough on large dominant firms who try and exercise market power. So they feel like they're enforcing the law. Of course, the tech titans think they're bringing us all sorts of great consumer goods and services, and I know where they're coming from. But we really have a clash between a new set of technology and their business models and a set of laws which were pretty much drafted 50 or 60 years ago to deal with the monopolies of the 20th century.
Google, Simon, isn't really in the search business, is it? It's in the data collection business. The core anti-competitive power that Google has is really control of user data, because user data is critical to getting online advertising dollars. And it's not just Google, but Facebook and companies like Alibaba that are chasing our data at the moment. Is there any scrutiny of that data issue?
There's scrutiny at two levels, one in competition law, of course, in data privacy law. But on the competition law side, where this is important is where Google or others can either acquire or push up the prices for advertising. But more importantly, and I think this is what's got Google into trouble this time, is the fact that they have their own customer selling service, B2C service, which they're promoting apparently through their use of all this data they accumulate on our searches when we use their engine. So I think normally it's the combination of the data plus some commercial service, which they're then able to pump up its profitability of, because they have all of this information on what we are interested in, what we search for, and when we buy things. And it's that mix which keeps running into trouble with the regulators in Brussels.
These companies, Simon, are getting bigger by using their dominance to lure even more money and users into their ecosystems. Is there anyone that could really compete with Google at the moment?
With Google, I doubt it. I mean, I think they've managed to see off quite a lot of different rivals in this particular sector. But I think generally we shouldn't overplay the competitive strengths of these firms over a 5 or 10 year period. We've always had lots of young and ambitious entrants who've come in and turned sectors upside down. And so that's why companies which have often been fined in the past for anti-competitive behavior, like Microsoft, the solutions there that they've had to follow because of the regulators have often been ones which have been completely eclipsed by new entrants. So I put my money on new entrants and new technology eating away at these monopolists. But we do need this oversight of these large firms just in case they're able to sustain their monopoly over the longer term.
Will the fines, Simon, levied against these big firms ever get paid, or are they just going to get bogged down in the legal appeals process?
There will almost certainly be an appeal from Google. They've already hinted at this. That process in Europe can take many years. It can take up to 7 or 8 years. But ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised if this fine does get paid. And the fine on Apple, for example, will probably get paid. It may get reduced in the courts. But I wouldn't be surprised if the fine does get paid. And I wouldn't be surprised if over the next few years, the Google and its rivals will also negotiate with the European Commission to come up with some type of way forward whereby the competition agency's needs are satisfied.
Simon, there is another element to this story. The huge fine and the fact that it's a US technology company that's in the crosshairs comes at a sensitive time for transatlantic trade relations. And of course, we've got this report due soon on US steel imports, and the EU warned this week that if the US imposes tariffs on steel imports from Europe and other countries, it's going to retaliate. Do you think that US-EU relations are set for a major test?
I do think the timing of this particular decision is awful, or at least very unlucky. We do have the steel decision coming next week, and then immediately after that, it looks like we will have the G20 summit in Hamburg, where Mr. Trump will meet with European leaders, and there's clearly potential here for substantial friction across the transatlantic in terms of commercial relations. So I think we are in for a very difficult time. It would be going too far to say that this decision will trigger a trade war, but if we ended up having a substantial clash across the Atlantic, we would look at this last decision as one of the building blocks in the road to a much more frosty relationship with the Americans.
Professor, great to talk to you. Simon Evatt, many thanks indeed for being with us on Counting the Cost.
Thank you very much.
Now, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg says the company he founded now shoulders a greater responsibility. He's even written an essay and posted it on his Facebook page, spelling out how humanity should forge a global community. So what's this really all about? Well, 13 years after launching Facebook, it now has 2 billion monthly active users. That's a quarter of the world's population. That makes Facebook the biggest social media platform on the planet. Don't forget, Facebook also owns Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger, which also have around 1 billion users or more. The company's faced a lot of criticism for spreading false news, so a big responsibility there, it's true. Also, Facebook's control of the ad market is all linked to hoovering up our personal data. And it is not that transparent about what data it collects and how it sells it on, a fact not highlighted in Zuckerberg's letter to the world. All right, still to come on counting the cost. Many cities are built on it, and where we are here in the desert, there's plenty of it. So what's behind the worldwide shortage of sand? But first, the nerve centre of the world's supply chain is scrambling to cope with the fallout from a global cyber attack. That's after AP Moller Maersk, the world's biggest container ship operator, was one of the corporate victims of this week's cyber attack. Other companies hacked include drug giant Merck, Russian oil company Rosneft, and FedEx. But the attack on Maersk in particular shows how cyber criminals can disrupt trade. Maersk was forced to shut ports around the world. Mariana Hond reports.
The virus first appeared in Ukraine, then it spread around the world.
This is one of the most virulent and widespread outbreaks of ransomware that we've ever seen.
One after another, the computer networks of big-name corporations and government agencies alike fell prey to the virus.
We don't have a total count, but because of the severity of its spread, it's certainly in the thousands and could well be in the tens of thousands.
This is the latest in a string of cyber attacks to use hacking tools that experts widely believe were stolen from the US National Security Agency and posted online in April. It's similar to last month's WannaCry virus that infected more than 300,000 computers in more than 150 countries. It also took control of computers and demanded a digital ransom. But there are differences.
Last time round there was a method that disabled the software. There's a web domain that it phoned home to. That's not the case here. They're using an email address to correspond with the victims, and that address has been blocked. So at the moment, the reports are coming in suggesting that even if you go against advice and you try to pay the ransom, you can't get through. So it's a fiasco from the perspective of the hackers as well as from the victims.
Some cyber experts say this doesn't look like a simple case of cyber extortion.
Criminals are often condoned, or there's conscious collusion with nation states to carry out acts for them in order to embarrass or in order to prove power to people for political motivation. If this was purely a cybercrime campaign, first of all, criminals don't want to be in the media, they don't want to be in the news, and they certainly would have a much more sophisticated way of receiving the ransom.
While the virus has gone global, Ukraine and Russia appear to have been hit the hardest. The Kremlin has called for greater cooperation between governments to tackle cybercrime.
Really, it tells us that old-fashioned, quite boring things like backup, really serious backup that you actually check, now looks like the last line of defence.
The rapid spread of the malicious software shows that even after recent, highly publicised cyber attacks, governments and corporations are still vulnerable.
The cyber attacks we saw in May, but also we have seen this week, just underlines the importance of strengthening our cyber defences, and that's exactly what NATO is doing.
Cybersecurity experts are still assessing the damage, but this already shows that hackers are as able as ever to stay one step ahead of the game.
Now, for the first time since independence, India is a single market for manufactured goods. It shifted from a state-based to a unified tax system. The Goods and Services Tax, or GST, began rolling out on the stroke of midnight, July 1st. It's one of the most ambitious economic changes India has ever attempted. The hope is that it will bring more revenue for the government and boost GDP. But there's still lots of confusion about the 5 rates and worries about its implementation, as Paul Chatterjian reports.
In Delhi's Karalbagh neighborhood, small business owners such as Vijay Huria are worried about India's new and controversial Goods and Services Tax, or GST. The new tax code has been in the works for more than a decade. It aims to revamp the existing patchwork of taxes into a uniform system. All states and territories will implement it except Indian-administered Kashmir.
To implement this will be very difficult for us. Neither the government is ready, nor are the traders ready. Besides, the government has said that everything will now be computerized.
Online and monthly reporting of taxes is just one of the many hurdles ahead. Many business owners say they are confused about the 213-page tax code. Most taxes are capped at 28%, but levies on luxury goods and tobacco can be much higher.
They've put GST on scooter spare parts. It's not a luxury vehicle. This is a vehicle that's owned by the poor people and the rich alike, and everyone needs this vehicle. And to put 28% GST on the spare parts of a scooter, this is an extremely wrong decision by the government.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government says the GST will make life simpler for businesses. Opponents say GST will erode the autonomy of states and make them more dependent on the federal government. Some shoppers are anticipating higher prices.
There are things which might become slightly expensive. There are some things which will remain same, status quo. But there are quite a few things which are probably becoming cheaper with the introduction of GST.
Economists believe the new tax scheme will boost growth by up to 2%, strengthening the world's sixth largest economy. Some investors are hopeful that the GST will make doing business with India and in India easier and more profitable.
We have demanded that period starting from 1st of July 2017 to 31st of March 2018, this 9 months period should be declared as an interim period, and no penal action should be taken against any trader on account of procedural lapses.
Back in Keralba, Vijay and others in the scooter trade are appealing for leniency during what's set to be a rocky transition into one common market for India's 1.3 billion people.
Joining us now from Singapore, Rajiv Biswas. Rajiv is the Senior Director and Asia Pacific Chief Economist for the Economics and Country Risk Group at IHS Markit. Rajiv, good to have you with us. So, one nation, one tax, one market. It's the biggest tax overhaul since independence. What do you make of it?
The reason it's so crucial is because it's going to create a single indirect tax system to replace a fragmented myriad of state-level indirect taxes which were in place previously. And one of the biggest problems that it created was that you had different rates in different states. Plus, when trucks were crossing the border from state to state, they had to queue up to address the fiscal issues around moving their goods across borders. So this added a lot of logistical costs for Indian industry. So industry is very, very pleased about this reform, and it's going to reduce logistics costs for Indian manufacturers very considerably in terms of freighting their goods across state borders.
No country of the size and complexity of India has ever attempted a tax reform on this scale. We all remember what happened when the government got rid of high denomination banknotes, the chaos that caused. Are we going to see, at least in the short term, a period of chaos?
Well, I think the banknote episode was a real debacle, but I think this is a more well understood transition. India is not the first country to move from state-based taxes to a more unified system, and it's certainly actually one of the last countries to be implementing a unified national indirect tax system. So I think there is a lot of international experience that India can learn from. It could be that there's some initial teething problems, and it will take some time for smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses to learn to comply with this new system of taxation. But I think it is an important transition. I think it's very widely recognized by economists and by politicians in India, as well as by industry in India, that these changes are very much needed. There's been quite a lot of opinion in favor of the implementation of this.
So, Rajiv, as you're saying, there are a lot of positives, at least internally in India. What about the perception of doing business as far as the international markets are concerned, and people who do business with India in the rest of the world?
For multinationals doing business in India, this is positive. For Indian companies that are exporting, this should also be helpful in lowering the cost of their exported goods. So it should make Indian exports more competitive.
Rajiv, great to talk to you on Counting the Cost. Many thanks indeed for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Now, the automatic teller machine turned 50 this week. Right now, there are an estimated 3 million cash machines dotted across the globe. There's even one at the South Pole. The very first ATM was used at a branch of Barclays in Enfield, North London. It was even turned gold to mark its half-century. The ATM marked a huge change for consumers because from June 1967, people could get access to their cash outside of banking hours for the very first time. Now, two major forces in global finance are making two very different calls. The Bank of International Settlements, which is sometimes known as the central bank for central banks, put out its annual report this week with a warning to world leaders. It said they need to keep markets in check to prevent another financial crisis. Just 2 days later, one of those leaders, Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen, had something to say. She's convinced that there won't be another financial crisis for at least as long as she lives. It was exactly 10 years ago this month when first signs of what's now dubbed the Great Financial Crisis started to show. Other significant birthdays this week, well, the iPhone turned 10. The original iPhone hit stores on June 29th, 2007. Although it wasn't the first smartphone, it did help to reinforce the idea of a computer in your pocket. It's disrupted many industries and even created new ones. The gadget has also helped transform Apple into the most valuable company in the world right now. Its market cap comes in at around $750 billion. Finally this week, it is the most mined material in the world, and there's a shortage of it. Rob Reynolds explains from LA.
If there's one natural resource you'd think we'd never run out of, it's sand. I mean, just look around. Sand covers a large part of the Earth's surface, and it's pretty much indispensable for our civilization. We use sand for glass and for concrete, which we use to make our houses, our roads, bridges, skyscrapers, stadiums, you name it. And while this kind of sand may be perfectly fine for making sand castles or playing a little beach volleyball, it's kind of useless for those industrial applications. Don't take my word for it. We found a sand expert.
And not all sand is created equal. There are differences in the shapes of the sand grains, the composition, the actual minerals that the sand grains are composed of, and there are differences in the actual size distribution of the sand grains.
A United Nations environmental report says that, mainly due to rapid economic growth in Asia, the mining of sand and gravel greatly exceeds the natural renewal rates of those substances. That's right, we're looking at a sand shortage.
We use millions and millions of tons of concrete every year, especially in the developing world. China, for example, they say in the past 4 years has used as much concrete as the United States has used since it was formed.
Shipping sand in bulk over long distances can be very expensive.
One example is Dubai, the large construction projects that have been happening in that part of the world. Surrounded by desert, sandy desert, but it's not the right kind of sand. So they've had to either dredge sand from offshore or import sand from Europe or other places. And so the costs can become prohibitive.
And then there's the impact of global warming. Some studies suggest that as sea levels rise, by the turn of the next century, most of California's golden beaches will disappear.
And that would be a real shame. Rob Reynolds in LA, ending our show for this week. If you want to comment on anything you've seen, join in the conversation. Follow and tweet me at @Finnegan, but use the hashtag AJCTC when you do. Or drop us a line. Countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our email address. There's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That takes you straight to our page, which has individual reports, links, even entire episodes for you to catch up on. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.